Hi everyone, I am Afflex, and finally, after decades upon decades of anticipation, my Superman pitch is done. I've had this idea for a little over a year, but finally decided to act on it when I was invited to this project called the DCCU by a YouTuber named Cinema Hero. As a part of this project, I was put in charge of a series of Superman movies, and today is of course the very first of those. There are also a lot of other creators involved, like Jack V Films and JT Videos, and their respective pitches for movies in the DCCU will come very soon on their own channels. The links are in the description. Please go check them out, but also I really hope you enjoy this pitch because it took a lot of time and I think it's pretty good. Here it is. We open on a tall building's roof as we see a teenage girl step out to the edge with tears in her eyes. She's on the phone with a lady begging her to stop and stay in the apartment, but she drops the phone off the edge. She stands there for a second and closes her eyes when a hand lands on her shoulder. Your doctor really did get held up, Reagan. It's never as bad as it seems. Reagan turns to see Superman standing behind her, looking at her with a smile. You're much stronger than you think you are. Trust me. Reagan looks him in the eyes and embraces him. Now, this is the opening scene for this movie, but it's also, of course, an exact adaptation of maybe the most famous scene from maybe the most famous Superman comic, All-Star Superman. Now, this scene is incredibly important to me for a variety of reasons, one of those being how good it is at showing who Superman is as a character. A beacon of hope for those who don't have much, a shining light in the darkness life can be. That's who Superman is. And I think it's very important that that's the first thing we ever see him do in this movie. I should also mention that Clark is being played by Wolfgang Novogratz in this movie. He looks like Clark, and he could definitely play the role, so yeah, we went with him. For the rest of Act 1, we're introduced to different characters, specifically the Daily Planet staff like Cat Grant, Steve Lombard, Ron Troop, and Perry White, but most importantly, photographer Jimmy Olsen, played by Matt Lintz, and star reporter Lois Lane, played by Emma Mackey. Clark, Lois, and Jimmy work together a lot, and there's a kind of romance between Clark and Lois that continues through the movie. I'm not going to really describe it in detail, but know that it is there and important throughout the entire thing. Anyway, the story they are currently covering is about a movie star coming back to Metropolis named John Corbin. He's played by Scott Eastwood. I think he could really pull off that, egotistical, full of himself kind of energy I'm looking for John Corbin, so I picked him. They're doing a big parade for him because he's super famous. I'm thinking just for interactions with the rest of the cast, Lois has an interview with him, and we just see how egotistical he is. We are also introduced to the Kents, specifically Martha, played by Sally Field, as Jonathan, played by Neil Flynn, passed away a couple years ago. I just really want us to see that relationship Clark has with his parents, and how important it is to both of them. Because this is a superhero movie too, we need an action scene. So we see a fight between Superman and Parasite, voiced by Tony Todd. I think Parasite is really underused, and he has a really interesting power. So I figure we use him here. And because it's a Superman movie, unless you're Man of Steel, I guess, we need Lex Luthor, who's being played by Mahershala Ali. He is trying to get rid of Superman, but he realizes that he doesn't have the physical power. He's trying to make an army of robots, but there's nothing that can power them. So he has a different plan, and that's to destroy Superman's image. As a part of this plan, Lex, with science stuff, I guess, is able to kill John Corbin at the Metropolis docks and frame Superman for the crime, after footage of the murder is leaked from a nearby security camera that filmed what happened. This is our inciting incident, of course, and leads directly into Act 2. Act 2 is mostly focused on Superman trying to clear his name and what the public now thinks of Superman. They're pretty split on what to think about him now. Did he actually murder someone? Is it right to support him if he did murder someone? It's pretty split down the middle, but it's tense. Clark, meanwhile, is trying to clear his name as Superman and as Clark Kent, where he helps Lois and Jimmy search for evidence, who are also sure Superman didn't do this. Their main suspect is Lex Luthor, as it's known that he's done shady dealings in the past. The public has just never been made aware of it, and this is probably something he would do, as they know he hates Superman. LexCorp also immediately offered support for John Corbin's family and took care of the body after his death, and took it to an unknown location. This investigation is mostly what Lois and Jimmy are doing throughout the movie. I should mention too that Superman doesn't stop saving people, even though some hate him and fear him. He's never going to stop fighting because that's his duty. It would also be good to have a scene here between Clark and his mom, where he asks her what she thinks he should do, and she tells him that he can't stop saving people, because whether the people are scared or not, he knows what he's doing is right. Also early in the second act, we see Superman fight the villain Livewire, played by Elizabeth Gillies, at a museum owned by LexCorp. She would say something like, "I knew I was right, you're no hero," or "Cut it with the Boy Scout routine, everyone knows you're a murderer." We also see a specific rock at the museum weaken Superman when he's near it. Superman is eventually able to beat Livewire despite the rock's effects, and gives her over to the police, some of which are also distrusting of Superman. Luthor sees the security footage of this fight, as it's his museum, and sees that the rock can also act as a power source, so he uses it to power a robot to fight Superman. Back to Lois and Jimmy though. They've been investigating around Metropolis, specifically at the docks. They tried to get the footage of the murder from the camera, but it was already taken. They do have another source at the docks, however, Bibbo Babowski, who after talking around the docks to people who kind of saw what happened, says that the Superman didn't seem really real, like a robotic version or like a copy or something. Also, I think it would be kind of funny to have a thing here where Lois and Jimmy try to talk to the sailors, but they all kind of talk weirdly, so Bibbo has to translate. Anyway, only one person in Metropolis has access to this level of robotics, so Lois and Jimmy head towards LexCorp. Back to Superman, though. The robot is unleashed on Metropolis, so Superman goes to stop it. It talks with a very distorted voice and taunts Superman about his crimes. Superman attempts to attack the robot, but is stopped when he gets close to the robot and feels weakened, so the robot punches him away easily. During the fight, Superman still works to save civilians, but some of them are still really scared of him. The robot, meanwhile, is putting even more people in danger. Eventually, the robot is able to defeat Superman after it fully exposes its kryptonite power source and punches him away far into the distance and deep into the Metropolis harbor. The robot looks to a crowd of people for applause, but there's nothing. The citizens look around and they see the destruction the villain has caused, and see what Superman has done to save people. They all run away in despair and fear, wondering what a world without Superman would look like. The robot leaves the scene as well to cause more destruction across Metropolis. The only people left at the scene are a broken Lois and Jimmy, knowing that Superman is gone, but she's not going to stop. Not until Lex is brought to justice. Lois looks back at some footage that Jimmy took of the fight and realizes something, so they rush back to the Daily Planet. They enter and run to Lois's computer. They cross-reference footage of the robot talking and an interview earlier with John Corbin, and Lois sees that both of them say the exact same phrase, and it's revealed to us that John Corbin is the robot. We leave the shock on their faces and move towards the TVs in the room, displaying different news networks reporting on the robot's attack on Metropolis. Corbin has gone across the city, destroying anything even related to Superman. The reporters are all seeing this, and they are all left asking the same question. Where is Superman? Act 3. We then cut to the Metropolis docks and into the water. We see at the very bottom of it, Superman lying there, unconscious. We then see a flashback into his childhood with Ma and Pa Kent. It's a preteen Clark walking home from school, and he seems really upset. He walks into the house, past his parents' questions at the table, and straight to his room. Both Ma and Pa Kent go to get up, but Pa Kent says he can handle it. He walks over to Clark's room and creaks the door open, asking if he can come in. Clark agrees, and Pa Kent sits down on the bed beside his son. He asks what's wrong, and Clark explains that he failed a test at school, and he just doesn't want to do school anymore. He wants to give up. In response, Pa Kent tells him a story of a time he gave up on something when he was younger, even though he knew he could have done it. He explains that we can never give up, because we are capable of so much more than we think. He touches his son's shoulder and says, "You're much stronger than you think. Trust me." They hug, and we go back to Clark in the water as his eyes open. We then cut to Lois and Jimmy as the robot rampages outside. They're in the Daily Planet with the rest of the staff, and they're trying to figure out how to stop the destruction without Superman's help. A lot of people bring up ideas like trying to find where Superman went or calling the military. They're also wondering where Clark Kent is, and they hope he's okay. Suddenly, the robot bursts into the building and says he's looking for Lois Lane. He threatens the whole crowd until Lois comes out. Metallo looks at her and asks for an exclusive interview. They get a televised interview running where the robot proclaims that he's killed Superman and that they shouldn't just call him a robot. His name is Metallo. Oh my gosh, finally. I can actually say his name now. Across Metropolis, we see citizens watch the broadcast in fear. Except for one. Of course, Lex Luthor, who is laughing, glad that his plan is going well, when suddenly a shape flies quickly past his window, startling him. We see it fly across the city as people look up. Is that a bird? No, I think it's a plane. The shape stops in front of the window of the Daily Planet, looking in on the broadcast. Jimmy freezes and says quietly, "It's Superman." Yeah, it's kind of cheesy, but I like it. Anyway, Superman floats through the broken window and starts to talk to Metallo. "I'm not dead yet, Metallo, and I won't be anytime soon. I got rid of you once, I'll get rid of you again." Metallo charges towards Superman and tackles him out the window. They have a small fight flying towards the ground, where Superman tries to keep his distance from Metallo and save some people. They land on the ground and continue to fight, and Superman starts off doing well, landing punches despite the kryptonite weakening him. Metallo gains the upper hand, however, when he uses Superman's other weakness, and starts to specifically target other people, and uses it as a distraction during the fight. By this time, Lois, Jimmy, and the staff of the Daily Planet get to the ground floor to see the fight. Lois yells out to Clark that Metallo is John Corbin, and he's at first really confused, but then realizes that there is a man in there somewhere. He tries to talk to Corbin and tries to calm him down from creating more destruction, but all Corbin cares about is the spotlight, and right now, Superman is getting it, so he continues to fight. Metallo again fully opens his chest, exposing the kryptonite, weakening Superman even more, and he punches him away through a couple of buildings. Superman lies on the ground, beaten, but he's not staying down. He looks around to see the people looking at Superman, begging him to keep fighting, and he thinks back to Pa Kent, Reagan, and he gets back up, because Clark Kent never gives up. He flies back to Metallo and tackles him through the air, punching him across the sky. Metallo eventually brings them both down into a construction site in Metropolis, where there aren't any workers, luckily. They continue to brawl when eventually Superman figures out that while also being a weapon, the kryptonite is also Corbin's power source. The fight continues, and Superman still tries to reason with Corbin, but he refuses. "If I kill you, he told me I'd get my body back." Superman takes in this information, but the fight continues. Eventually, Metallo has Superman on the ropes and is just beating him senseless. Metallo reveals his kryptonite again to weaken Superman, enough to actually kill him, and hold Superman off the edge of the building. Metallo then picks up a piece of rebar with his other hand and readies to stab Superman in the heart with it, but is interrupted by Superman saying, "I'm sorry." As Metallo thrusts the bar forward towards Superman's chest, Superman grabs Metallo and throws them both off the edge of the building. They separate in midair and Metallo loses hold of the bar. Superman pushes away from Metallo and grabs the bar in midair, throwing it into his open kryptonite heart and leaving him to fall into a pit of wet concrete. I don't know, maybe that's what the construction workers were working on before they ran. After this, the police arrive and start to try to contain Metallo. Superman also helps to fix what he destroyed on the construction site, as the workers return. We then transition to footage of this on TV being watched by Lex Luthor hours later in the early hours of the night. He is obviously angry as he is storming around his office when a shadow appears over him. He looks to see, floating outside his window, Superman, staring at him with his arms crossed. Lex makes a supervillain speech of how he can never be stopped because of his status and money, but Superman says nothing and just floats there. Lex starts to get angry at him and throws something at him, but Superman catches it and crushes it in his hands. As he readies to fly away, he says, "If you try anything, know I'll always be there to stop you." Lex tries yelling at him even more, but he's already gone. Before I move on, I should mention that this whole interaction is taken from Season 1, Episode 3 of Superman the Animated Series. It works really well there, and I think it would translate well to this movie too. Anyway, we follow Clark as he flies through Metropolis with a smile on his face. He then lands down into a back alley as we see him exit the other side of it dressed in normal clothes. He walks into an apartment building and checks the board out front for a name, and he buzzes up. We don't see who it is, though. He gets to the door and knocks when Lois Lane answers it. We see that they both have an important question to ask each other. Lois seems very driven and more serious, while Clark is pretty nervous, sort of dancing around it for a bit before Lois finally asks him, "Are you Superman?" Clark is stunned and stumbles over his words and tries to deny it, but Lois is really sure. So Clark folds and explains to her everything. What he is, why he does it, how he did it. Lois isn't mad or anything, though. She understands why he kept it from her, and really anyone, because he is still a guy before he is Superman. They talk about that for a while when Lois remembers that Clark had a question too. He tries to get out of it, but Lois pressures him into asking it. He gives in and asks her to go out with him. He's a little embarrassed and kind of apologetic at first, but she agrees and he is ecstatic. They agree on a time and a place and he goes to leave, but before he does, Lois stops him. "Since I know you're Superman, could you fly me around?" Clark hasn't really tried it before, so he's a little unsure, but he looks at her and smiles. We then cut to Superman flying across Metropolis with Lois in his arms, as civilians look up in awe. Before going even further into the air, the pair look at each other and smile. There is also a post-credit scene in the movie with a Kryptonian pod landing on Earth, with the symbol of the House of El on its front. I really hope you enjoyed the pitch. Superman is one of my favorite heroes, and I hope I did him at least a little bit well. Again, please check out the other creators in this project. Their links are in the description, and their own DCCU pitches will come out very soon. Please look to the Cinema Hero channel for the Phase 1 announcement out now. And please subscribe, like if you enjoyed the video, and have an amazing day.